Hey, good evening, everybody. I am Paul Sterling. This is my co-host, Leo, and he's about to get off my lap because he's way too much in the way. And welcome to Men and Masculinity in the year 2020. And we've got four different representations of it. And what I want to do tonight is dive in, interview, find out what men want in relationships, what men want to give in relationship, what opens their hearts, what closes their hearts, what turns them on, and how are they shaped. So as I go through and interview them, I'm going to ask them some questions like who were their mentors and what shaped them as a human being? What relationships do they want to be like, and what relationships do they want to avoid? So we've got people from around the country here joining us. I am Paul Sterling. This is part of Compassionate Talk, which is brought to you every morning at 9 a.m. and every night at 6 p.m. And it's a conglomeration of me, Paul Sterling, and Argue Less, Love More, and my dear friend, Scott Katamas, who is the head of Love Coach Academy. And he is a teacher of love coaches, and most of the people on this call have been through at least one or more of his courses, including myself. And then Debbie G, who runs Spirituality Gone Wild. So I'm going to have the men go around and introduce themselves. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share your age, because I intentionally picked different sort of age groups here so that you're not hearing just one from one age. I am 66 years old. God, it's fun to even say that shit, because it's like, how did that happen? How did 66 years go by? So next up is Adrian. Maybe you could give us a little brief shout out about how you got to where you are now and what you want to talk about in this call.
How I got to be here, how did I get to be here now? That's quite a question. I mean, the main reason I'm here, or a significant reason I'm here, is because of my relationship with the Love Coach Academy and Scott. I met Scott in Hawaii like 7 years ago, and it changed my life. I think another significant part of my life that's brought me to where I am in a significant way is my relationship with Vipassana meditation. It's a Buddhist meditation where I practice the ability to feel my sensations and observe them objectively. And so that's a huge part of my life. And bringing the relationship skills of nonviolent communication and compassionate communication was such an amazing fit for me. Just really changed my life. So
let me interrupt. Hopefully all you guys can handle me interrupting, only to bring you back a little bit, because you said one thing that you said, like, Scott changed your life. And so I'd like people to hear sort of a mini before and after, because I know that there's been several transformational things for me in my life.
Yeah.
What happened?
You know, the aha moment was the experience or understanding that there's nothing inherently that's right or wrong in relationship. There's something that's wrong for me. Like, there's certainly what's like, I need to get clear on what I need or want, but there's nothing that's inherently right or wrong. I was coming from a paradigm in the context of a relationship that I have a good filter of what's morally or ethically right or wrong or appropriate, and that the other person might be wrong in a situation, needs to admit that they're wrong.
How well did that go?
And so like, it can be a subtle thing to understand. And I imagine that you might talk a little bit more about the difference between what's wrong for me, and that there's a wrong for the other person, but coming together to understand what's mutually right for us and how we can work together to understand what works for us, works for you. So I mean, just that, like, there's nothing inherently wrong, and that just changed my life.
So I'm going to translate a little bit of that.
Yeah, please do.
I heard is like what shifted for me, because I started with Marshall Rosenberg, and then I got introduced to Scott. But Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of NBC, and it's like everything we're doing, we're trying to meet a beautiful need. And sometimes our strategies are elegant, and sometimes our strategies suck. In other words, lots of side effects. So I taught in prison for 8.5 years and dealt with a lot of people who had drug issues. And it wasn't the drug wasn't a problem, it's the side effects. So you think about it, in life, we have behaviors, and each behavior has a side effect. And sometimes the side effect is painful and sometimes it's good. So as we move towards our needs, trying to do it in an elegant way with the least side effects. So anyway, thank you, Adrian, for your introduction. And
beautiful. I think the big piece, one thing I can add to that is that in this shift, what I stopped doing, and it took some time, took some practice, is when you don't make the other person wrong, when I started taking responsibility for what I needed in the context of a challenging situation, and moved away from like, you're wrong because you're not doing what I want. I mean, it just, wow. Yeah, so.
And
thanks.
I'm going to ask each of you this similar question, but what's your relationship to vulnerability?
So you're asking me that right now?
Yeah, I'm asking you right now, and then it will bounce down to our next panelist.
You know, I like to think, and I certainly do think sometimes I do really well with vulnerability. Like sometimes I'm even an oversharer. And so on some level, I feel like I do really well with being vulnerable. And my partner actually feels, and she likes to tell me that there's a way that I avoid going deeper. There's a way that I do bypass. So that's something that I'm looking at, and I need to explore more within myself. Like, maybe, yeah, there's a way that, like, on some level, I can be vulnerable for things that are comfortable. That might be harder for other people, but there's a way that I'm not looking at some aspects of myself.
So what can your partner do? And I'm asking this so that if there's women on the call that are listening in to our secret talk here, what causes you to want to open up and share and be more vulnerable? And what causes you to want to shut down and move away and head for the man cave?
Well, definitely feeling safe. Like, if I feel that I'm going to be held in my vulnerability, weakness, yeah, like when I'm clear that I've acted in a way that's not meeting my values, that I have some shame around, if I feel like I'm going to be held, gosh, yeah, that's pretty key for me. Yeah, and then the big one that shuts me down really clearly is when I feel like I am showing up and I'm not seen, or I'm showing up and I'm criticized. That's classic for me. I'm pretty sure that's probably classic for most people, but yeah.
And I would love, I'm going to bounce down in a second, but I want to leave you pondering this. Any example of that you'd like to share? What does it look like when I come back to you? What does it look like to be shut down? What is the words that they can say, or the look, or something? Because a lot of times I don't think our partners know that they're doing it. Same way we don't. So I'm going to come back to you with that question, and I'm going to bounce down to Daniel. Aloha in Hawaii. Maybe you could share a little bit about yourself. And just before we got on this call, Daniel is a amazing soul and like a world-class artist. And he was just sharing one of his awesome works of art a second ago with us. So maybe you could share your heart and your art, and what was the turning points in your life, and who's been your mentors?
Well, I remember the first self-help book that I picked up that really changed the course of my life. And it was Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones. And yeah, this was 30 plus years ago. And I just remember just having so many ahas reading that book. And it just led me down this path, which that was probably 10 years before I came to Hawaii. And when I came to Hawaii, there's just so much happening here in the way of healing and healing teachers coming and workshops, and this is where I met Scott as well. I think it was 6 years ago. But also one of the first people I met was Jack Zimmerman, and he teaches the way of the council. And I started doing couples work with him and a group back in 2000, and worked with them for a few years. And then I discovered the Mankind Project. Oh, in between there, I discovered MVC and Marshall Rosenberg. And just at first it was super tedious, but just the language to be able to really get in touch with what was going on for me was so liberating. It just drew me in further and further. And then
let me back you up again. It's like we use this term healing, but what do you consider a wound? What did you heal? What was the before and after, so that people can go, oh, I have that wound.
Well, I didn't necessarily have an abusive or traumatic childhood. It would be more along the lines of maybe neglect, and not even so bad, but just not as much affection as I wanted, not as much understanding, not as much connection, not as much support, not as much, really getting me especially from my father, and it's difficult because invariably I came across lots of people who had really deep traumatic things that happened to them, and when I compared my wounds to theirs, I was like, oh, mine's nothing, but it actually is something. Everybody's got their own flavor, and though mine were softer and maybe drawn out over a long period of time instead of like a specific incident, I'm still wounded, and I'm still like trying to bring back my whole self,
Yeah. So what was a turning point for you? You kind of said going to Hawaii and talking to them. Was there a specific thing that
Well, I would say, I became involved in this international men's organization. I've mentioned it before, Mankind Project.
Right.
And I've been involved for 11 years, sitting in circle every Tuesday that whole time. And it's just been profound for me in realizing that the world is a sacred mirror for myself. And everything that comes up that seems to be that I can blame on somebody else, it has something to do with me inside. And then just to, little by little every week, just peel another layer of the onion off, and start to really understand who my authentic self is,
And what do you want in relationships? What do you want to give? What do you want to receive? And you're in a long-term committed relationship, if I'm right.
Yeah, my wife and I have been together for over 9 years. We're really working with the dynamics of the masculine and the feminine. We work a lot together, so we're resonating a lot, and oftentimes both in the masculine at the same time. And there are times when, of course, we really want to drop into the polarization of that. And
before you go further, can you say more about what your definition, because it's kind of changing our definitions of what masculine and feminine are. So I'd love to hear expansion on that.
So like the masculine, or sometimes we call it the alpha and the omega, the alpha being the masculine. like the protector, the one who is out there in case there's any danger on the perimeter of our world. You know, I'm the one that confronts it and keeps it safe so that she can relax and really drop into her intuitive feminine self, her receptive self, and feel safe. So that would be an example of something that we're working on. As an artist, I've also been more in tune with my creative, maybe more feminine side, or the omega side. And so I'm really stepping up in more of the masculine now and working on that aspect of myself. Yeah.
And, you know, I talk to men and women all the time, and one of the things that women are missing from a lot of men right now is their growl.
Right.
Because it's an interesting dance that we've had to do now with the transformation of roles and what it means to be feminine and what it means to be masculine. And there's also a place where, you know, having that growl and having vulnerability. So what's your relationship to vulnerability? And then we're going to bounce to Skylar in a second.
Well, the thing about the growl is, like last night I've been doing couples group. We've been doing it together, us two, for 8 years now. And she had our bottle of water, and there's a big difference between me saying, "Hey, would you mind passing me the water so I can have a drink?" or "Hand me the water." And she gets like a little bit like, ooh, she likes that growl, that like, my man wants his water, I'll give him whatever he wants, you know. And it's uncomfortable for me, you know. I've been the nice guy, the polite guy. And there's vulnerability. I tend to like lean to the naive side to make a judgment of it. Like I open up pretty easily. I trust pretty easily strangers or groups of people when there's an opportunity to like share vulnerably. It feeds me somehow. I feel like the rush of my heart opening and the connection it creates. So that dominates my experience when I have an option to be vulnerable. Of course, it bites me in the butt sometimes with people who are maybe more aggressive or bullies. You know, I've come across a fair share of that because of my lack of discernment around vulnerability. And I think as I'm developing my masculinity, I'm also developing that discernment of when I can be vulnerable and when I can't be vulnerable.
Yeah, and there's actually vulnerability in having your growl. And there's some background noise. I don't know where that's coming from. Clunking around.
Yeah, not here.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian.
So I was going to ask you a question, so I unmuted myself. I was hoping you could describe what growl means for you a little bit more, Paul. I'm curious of that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So for years, I was a Tantra educator and taught about sacred sexuality. And Daniel brought up a point I was going to ask him more about, but there's something I call polarity, and you use the same word, but if there's a strong polarity, strong masculine, strong feminine, you know, and it doesn't matter who's in the roles. Like, you know, the guy can be in his feminine and the woman can be in her masculine, and there's like this, I'm going to take you. I am going to, you know, and it's scary because there's also that part of, we've learned the whole Me Too, men unconscious and taking something they want unconsciously versus a conscious cooperative dance of like a growl. And like, you know, you can literally like right on the vagus nerve that goes on their neck, you can growl. And if you're holding a woman, will make her go weak in the knees if you do it right. I'm not going to go through how to do it exactly right, because you need to learn the ethics go with it, because it works about 90% of the time. But it's like that, I'm going to take you. Do you want to be taken? You know, and it's not without consent. There's a dance of consent in there, you know. And something I learned years ago, I was single and dating, and I went on a date, and at the end of the date, you know, there's do you kiss or don't you kiss, and I didn't, and I had like a 45-minute drive home going, should I or shouldn't I? Shouldn't I? Shouldn't? And I woke up, I said, oh my God, I'm an adult. You know what adults can do? Adults can ask, I'd like to kiss you. Would you like to be kissed? And I found that that's what I did. And I found that I stopped dating people that were upset by that. Like, I don't want to tell you, I want you to just know. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, man. There's a lot of stuff going on the planet. If you're not interested in telling me what you want and need, I don't want to go any further. So that's, Adrian, that's about the growl. And Daniel, I'm going to skip over to Skylar, and we're going to come back to you. But Skylar, welcome to the group. How did you end up on this path, I guess, of personal growth? Because before I met you, you were long on this path of personal growth. And
yeah, does this mic work?
Yep.
Perfect. Excellent. I have a really beautiful childhood. So it was always really difficult for me to find out from a very young age, around 8 years old, I was really depressed. And I basically was suicidally depressed my entire life. Like, I was in and out of institutions. I, didn't know who to listen to. I had, every kind of therapist and stuff like that. And so I had all this head knowledge. I had so much good head knowledge, and I didn't know how to really turn it into wisdom. And I would get into these relationships, and they were all multi-year long relationships. And I wouldn't take enough of a break in between them to grow, like to personally reflect. I would just go on to the next one, on to the next one. And I'm a pretty big component of, you attract what you are in a lot of ways. And I just kept attracting the same thing over and over into my life. And, life was trying to pound these lessons into my head. And I had this job where I would listen to like Alan Watts and like other philosophy talkings for hours and hours and hours. Like, I would list 40 hours a week. I could just, use earbuds. And it was a really fortunate scenario. And so I gained even more head knowledge. And the big turning point for me was when I realized that I am in a never-ending tiny little loop, and I was comfortable there. I was comfortable being in this tiny loop because I knew exactly what was going to happen. And unfortunately, my comfort zone was I had no boundaries. I always found vulnerability very easy. I think it might have to do with the way that I was raised. My parents were extremely vulnerable with each other. We had a business at our house, and we all worked together. As a cabinet company. So we all went on installation jobs and, used chop saws and stuff like that, even as little kids with like a nail gun. And my mom's like, oh, and I'm just like, oh, no, I'll be fine. So, and so we all worked together really well as a family, and it was really, really wonderful. And so I kept, anytime I went to see like a therapist or anything like that, people were like, so let's talk about your child. I'm like, can we not? Like, I don't know what we're going to find. And so when I started focusing on who I was in the moment, and started to becoming more present with myself, I realized that I would be so vulnerable. And I think Adrian said something like this. It might kind of echo this, but I would be extremely vulnerable in a way that a lot of people who I was dating had not been with a guy who was this outwardly vulnerable. And it would almost blind them with the amount of vulnerability I would have, to the point where I never had to work on me. I never had to look at me, because the real stuff, how like you have a giant to-do list, and the really important thing is at the very bottom, and you're like, oh, I'll go do the laundry and the dishes and I'll mow the lawn, and I'm so productive, but I didn't do the actual meat of the sandwich.
Right. I'll do everything but.
Yes. And so I would help them. I would help them in their jobs and their businesses, and I would try to be like an entrepreneur for them. I would oftentimes find myself being back before I understood what I was even saying. I was like, I became the relationship. I became the person to go to solve issues, to to like ask if there's an issue, to constantly try to take care of both of us. I was far overextending, and by doing that, by going, oh, I have all this head knowledge, I always know what's right, as if that was a really great way to go about things, I would overreach into their life, and I would just put like, because I suffered so much, the last thing I wanted to do was watch someone else suffer. And so as I became vulnerable, that allowed me, and they allowed me into their minds, and I would just like peek in there, and I would like sand down all the corners and put like bumper lanes on the when we're going bowling, like, oh, you can never lose. And so I would stunt people's growth, and it would just, I would steal their lessons from them, and be like, no, you don't have to do any of that. I've been through all of it for you. Yeah, I've lived all these issues for you. And so I realized I was being vulnerable and open and direct to all these people, but the one person I wasn't was myself. I didn't give myself the time of day. I didn't know what self-love meant. I just, I thought what self-love and all the right things to do was to be really, really smart, to be really intelligent, to always have the right answer, and to be witty. I could always act as because I was used to acting okay as a depressed person. So I would act a certain way, but I never really was okay. And then after I got out of
wait, I'm going to
slow
you down and back up a little bit, because I love that you're an anomaly, because there's this model behind me, the ROS, your relationship operating system, your habits, patterns, and beliefs. And there's a cultural belief that if somebody is depressed, the parents screwed up. And so I'm just wanting to let a lot of parents at some levels off the hook here, and just just say that, so you go like, your parents didn't screw you up, is what I heard you say right now, that something else was going on. And where are you on that journey?
Yeah, the depression journey. That's a very great question. So I'm very, very happy. This is the happiest I've ever been in my life by infinite miles. Like I could have never have imagined I'd ever even reached this point where the world is falling down around all of us right now in crazy ways. And I have this inner peace and this inner joy I've never even knew. I've read about it and done millions of talks, like listened to talks and like lectures and stuff like that. I've heard about this a million times, and I've tried to enter this world so many times, but being with myself in a way that I never even knew I could. It's like I was so vulnerable, but I wasn't vulnerable with me. I didn't listen to me.
Yeah, there's one of the lesser known quotes from Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, is intimacy is the ability to enjoy someone else's pain. Now, he didn't say that sadistically, but if somebody's happy, Skylar, you can enjoy their happiness. And we have this judgment that if they're in pain, pain is bad, happy is good. So we try to get them out of pain by, going all the things you described. So that's intimacy with another person, is the ability to be with them without trying to change them while they're in their pain.
Exactly.
Intimacy with ourselves is being able to be with ourselves in our pain without running for drugs, TV, computer, sex, distraction, fixing somebody else's pain. I can relate to everything you said. I'm guilty of, all of the above. And like, your pain is, or your problem is so much easier to fix than mine. Let me work on you.
Yeah. It very much felt like that at the time. Always. Yeah.
So what are you looking for in relationships? And by the way, I see a bunch of comments on there. Hi, Teresa, Hope, Abba, Linda saying, I know someone who's, has had several relationships break off because he was too nice and there was no growl. And nice, by the way, I came up with an acronym for nice. Not interested in connecting emotionally. How nice. It was a nice conversation. It was a nice day. It's a nice, like, no, and anyway, so back to you, Skylar. What do you want in a relationship, and what do you want to contribute in a relationship?
Yeah, one of the most top level things that just jump right to mind is, and you kind of said it with the growl. I was a doormat, right? I was just bowled over for so long. I didn't have any growl at all. I always saw, like the first relationship I ever had, it was like, I was rewarded for denying who I was. Deny your sexuality. Sexuality is really wrong. She came from a very fanatically religious family that was like, this is how you should have a relationship. And that ended up kind of like, I was like, okay, I'll totally do that. If that makes you like me, then I was 18. I was like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And so I started denying myself. But as I really started to come into my own, I started to realize that I would bowl people over with like trying to fix them. I would bowl people over with my emotions of being so vulnerable but so sad in the depressive state, or I would let them bowl me over because I would be so vulnerable. I would be like a carpet of like whatever you want. So that led me to the conclusion of the most important thing that I really, really enjoy and that I see with my folks, and that is absolute total relationship equality. Like I want equality in a relationship where there isn't, I see it as a partnership, and it's seen as an equal partnership from both ends. And there isn't no one's making anyone an enemy. No one's tearing anyone down to feel better. We're in this together. And that is kind of what has led me down the path of like, right now I'm studying to do like coaching, and with like a specific, like trying to do relationship coaching, because I find it infinitely fascinating. And there is just so much there to explore and learn. But yeah, for sure, I absolutely like equality in the way in which I communicate.
Well, I think you're going to probably make a great coach, because we turn our pain into our passion. And, they say every master started out as a disaster. So I'm in the disaster seat. That's why I've got this upper corner right here, because I've been through 1 divorce, 4 broken engagements. I've been through almost every mistake in a relationship can be. And for the last 25 years, I've been coaching couples and continuing to grow. Like, it's not like I got to a place. Mastery is not a destination, it's a path. So we're on the, everybody on this call is, in my mind, on the mastery path. They're moving in a direction towards having a better life and being a better person. So I'm going to bounce back up to Adrian and check in with you. And I know I left you with a question, and I'm being really transparent and vulnerable. And by the time I got back to you, I forgot the question, but I hope you remember it.
I'm trying to remember the specifics of it. I remember the example that I came up with, but it was something about an example of when I feel criticized, or kind of a dynamic in the relationship that really doesn't work for me, or where I feel shut down. And I feel grateful that it was kind of challenging for me to come up with a situation. So grateful that I'm in the relationship that I'm in, where there is so much mutuality and capacity to be together in a way that really works. But triggers definitely still come up. The one example that came up recently was subtle and simple. It was like we're being in the kitchen. She had just made dinner, and she was low resourced and frustrated. Nothing to do with me specifically, but there was a quality of just agitation that was happening for her. I was in a pretty good place, and we were getting ready to dish up the food and sit down. And there was a way that she encouraged me to get the food, to dish my plate up, that it wasn't an invitation. It was this demand, which was really interesting. It's not a common occurrence where she'll be this way, but it was like, go ahead and put your food on the plate. I was like, whoa, this is out of left field. But it was just this quality of just like directing me to do something that as opposed to like, okay, yeah, go ahead and dish up, it's time now. It was just this intensity behind it that was painful, and it was unusual. So I think that's Yeah, so that's an example that.
What did you need? How do you like? I'm just listening. There's some great stuff, and if you haven't studied any of Dr. Sue Johnson on attachment theory, well worth writing down and going and doing. But like, we start the dance. So she said something that way, and that's triggers something, some story in your head that started the dance. Where did the dance go, and how did you turn it around?
Well, fortunately, I'm passionate about this kind of stuff. I'm passionate about my ability to notice triggers and to be with them and to not go into attack or frustration. So it ended pretty sweetly. We sat down. I sat with my agitation. There was something else that happened as well. There was 2 points. I'm trying to remember. I couldn't remember what the other one was. But when we sat down, I let it sit for a little while, and I just brought up the situation. I was like, "Oh, so this happened, and this felt uncomfortable for me. What's going on? Like that didn't feel good. I'm curious what's going on because, particularly because it was unusual for her to treat me in that particular way. So something was clearly alive. So I just spoke to it. I spoke to the fact that it was challenging for me and it didn't feel good. And I brought up the other one as well. Like that didn't feel good. What's going on? And
well, one of the things I teach couples is there's this expression that says, don't sweat the small stuff. I think that's totally wrong. I tend to go against the grain here, but here's what I think is it's easier to deal with an acorn than an oak.
Mm-hmm.
And you in this metaphor, at least from watching you dealt with the acorn rather than having it become an oak.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you said that. So if we handle the little things, they don't become big blow-ups. And it's important to kind of know how resourceful we are in this whole dance.
Totally. And when we have a good relationship with our body and what happens when something's happening that doesn't feel good, it's like a great warning sign. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, something's happening. Get curious. Like, oh, this didn't feel good. Hey, this happened. It didn't feel good. What's going on? I'm curious about it. And I'm just so grateful that I've spent as much time as I have in that dance and in that relationship with what happens in my chest when a need isn't being met, when it doesn't feel good. Yeah, and so grateful that I have the ability to get curious about it. And that's not to say that things can't be triggering enough or frustrating enough where I'm certainly capable of being triggered enough to go into defensiveness, to go into shutdown for sure. Yeah.
I think I'm guilty as, it's a muscle. I'm going to ask the last question about needs. What's your relationship with needs and dancing with them? And then I'm going to go around to each of you. And Daniel, I remember your art. I am not going to let you get by without showing your beautiful art. And Skylar is actually a musician, makes music or produces. So we've got a bunch of artists. So what's your relationship with your needs, Adrian?
My needs around relationships specifically, like what it is that you want.
Well, I'll reframe it.
Yeah.
We come from a culture, I call it need shame. So there's 3 levels. Like when you go into the national parks, they show the fire danger, green, yellow, red. So we have need shame, which is basically, I feel broken that I have a need. If I was a whole and complete person, I wouldn't have needs. Needs embarrassment, which is where I know I have needs, but I'm embarrassed to ask for them. And if you don't meet my needs without me asking, you don't love me. And then needs embrace. It's like I have a precious, beautiful need, and I feel safe asking for this need to be met.
Gosh, this is interesting because I was just having this conversation with my partner the other day about just how well we get along, really appreciating our relationship. how easeful and mutual and fun and celebrating it. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine who's struggling. So I came back after playing golf. I know, golf. And just was really appreciating our relationship. And she said that she thinks one reason why we get along so well is I am so easygoing, and that I don't have a lot of preferences. And she has a lot more preferences. And it brought up a conversation around, like, is there a way that I'm not just easygoing in a totally pure healthy way, but there's a way that I don't speak up and own the needs that I have. And that's certainly an exploration that I want to explore. I think it could be a combination of both. And that being said, I feel like one thing that's really important for me is being with somebody who has an emotional high IQ, and in the context of conflict is able to meet me on some level. Now, obviously, I'm going to have a lot of tolerance for somebody who can do what I do, which is get defensive and shut down. But it's somewhere along the way has the ability to come back and take responsibility for what's going on for them, name what it is they're needing and wanting, and come back with a pretty high level of ownership and clarity. And and I feel, though, Paul, that that when I do have a need, I am really clear about it. Like, right. One of the things you're talking about, Skylar, that I really appreciated was, and I kind of felt like the nice piece, like in the woman's comments. What I was thinking was that when men show up and they aren't clear about what they want and speak to it, it doesn't feel good. So even though my partner kind of accused me of being maybe too easygoing, and she wants to hear more of my needs and wants and is questioning, like, am I not really showing up fully to express what I want? I clearly do it, and I feel like I do it. When I want something, I'm pretty darn clear about it, and I feel okay about it. I feel like I really honor what it is and celebrate the things that I do want. I really do. Yeah, but it's a deeper. I want to look at it more and see if there is some way that I am bypassing.
Well, there's always
there for me.
The universe, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it, always has a graduate course. Mm-hmm. Like when I was learning this stuff years ago, and I thought, okay, I'm getting pretty good at it. They had me come in and teach counselors at a prison, and I'm like, I'm down with that. I got it. And at the end of this training, I said, you ought to have something for the inmates. And they said, great, you're it. I'm like, oh, no, I've never done that. It's like, so there's always some next level you can go to in this. And the best way to learn something really deeply, which is what most of the people on this call do, is by teaching it, and then living it, and then living it and having a partner that can quote you back to you. It's like, no, do not quote me to me that. So thank you, Adrian. And Jay, I see you on there on the comments. Thank you for joining us, and Linda and Abba. And Daniel, I'm going to bounce down to you. What's your relationship with your needs? And can we see your beautiful art?
Oh, sure.
I'm going to see if I can make
this is
whoops, no, I went the wrong way.
This is blown sculpted glass. Make it smaller. So this is I hand sculpt this out of molten glass.
Wow.
And then carve the imagery. If you can see that.
I'm gonna change the screen for a second. Okay, there we go. So we can see it. And I'm going to bring them back in. And that's a lot of Hawaiian symbology. Even the hook there, that's a fish hook.
Yeah. Another one.
Whoops.
Yeah, so sculpting glass and then carving the imagery into the surface and then wrapping with hemp. been doing it for 30 years, working with glass, and I have 20 galleries that represent my work here in Hawaii, and we're really starting, since all of them shut down during this this thing. We've started marketing ourselves and really hit on something, and really taking it to the next level. So I'm finding some gold in this time that initially was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So, yeah.
And do you consider yourself in this dance with your partner? Do you consider yourself mainly in the masculine role, the feminine role? Are you protector, provider, or supporter, enhancer?
Well, I'm doing all the physical stuff. I'm building the equipment, maintaining the shop, and guiding the team of people that work together, and then physically creating the pieces. A lot of that is a combination of masculine and feminine. And she does a lot of the administrative work, the office work. She's also the photographer, the web designer, and she deals with the galleries. So there's as far as the business end goes, and the art itself, there's a mixture of it. We both have a creative end. She's the photographer, and I'm the sculptor. And we both like get down in the dirty business too, like getting shit done, you know?
So let me ask you, what's your relationship with your needs?
So my needs, well, I've realized that I developed this very similar thing to both Adrian and Skylar, that I was out of touch with my needs, and my needs really didn't matter. It was more important that I was accepted and loved, and yeah, that brought me into relationships without a growl, to use your terms. And then I started discovering that I have needs, and beautiful human needs. But you know, there was this other piece in between where someone touched on it, where if someone, like, I had this belief that if someone loved me, not only they would know what my needs are, and then they would meet them too. And
Without
then
having to ask, right?
without having me ask. And
Yeah.
then I knew they loved me. And I was wondering why no one loved me. It's like, am I not lovable? So yeah, a trip.
Yeah.
Right now, yeah.
One of the 7 skills, it's like we're teaching a course. This is a clear invitation for people to join us June 6th, but there are 7 core skills that I think almost every relationship needs. Effective communication is the first one, and making friends with your needs is the second one. Being able to notice that we even have them, to name them, to allow distinctions, like you, Daniel, in the world of art, have a whole language around glass that I don't. I have glass. It's broken or it's okay. You know, I mean, like glass. You know, you probably have textures and tones and colors and like types, you know. So it's like learning, noticing, naming, and negotiating needs is a key skill. And there's 7 altogether. Dealing with conflict. How do you dance with conflict to bring your, if you can't dance with conflict, you have to stay nice. If you can't be with conflict, you have to keep avoiding it. So you're trapped in the nice role. And we all get wounded and triggered. Do we get bitter or do we get better? And trust, 2 types of trust. Learning about, I trust you, but do I trust myself in a relationship with you? And it goes back to what almost everybody said, is if I have to be nice, then I'm not trusting me in the relationship. I'm not keeping my boundaries. I'm not being clear on my needs. And just so that everybody's clear, and I want all you guys to nod if you're in agreement, none of us are saying that we make our needs more important than our partners, but not less important. That there's a dance where it's like, and Skylar said it about his parents, about that they're partners, that they're equals. His needs aren't more important and neither are hers. So it's this dance of being able to negotiate them. And then intimacy, and there's 3 shades of it: physical, emotional, and sexual intimacy. And learning about those, learning like Scott teaches about emotional IQ. Do we actually know what emotions are? A lot of times when I talk to people, they say, I feel like you are. And it's like, that's not even a feeling, that's a thought. And the last one, and I'm going to bounce back to you, is dealing with differences, difficulties, and decisions. Deciding how we're going to decide as a couple in a relationship, doing the dance. So any closing thoughts, Daniel, and we'll bounce and get closing thoughts from each of these fine gentlemen.
There we go. Well, I'm just learning about my needs right now, and I feel like I'm discovering the balance between honoring and recognizing the needs of my partner, and also valuing mine equally. It seems like I'm just starting to get to that point, and I have a ways to go, and I have a really wonderful partner to do it with. So
yeah, thank you so much, Daniel, for your wisdom and for sharing your art. And I look at it as a relationship gym. I work out almost daily, like do something. And even before I got on the call today, it was a shorter one, but I went for about an hour-long mountain bike ride. And it's like, if I don't take care of my body, it's not going to take care of me. And if I don't go to the relationship gym, I'm going to have flabby relationship muscles. And I'm going to have a flabby relationship. And if you want a remarkable relationship, you need remarkable relationship skills. And it's working it on a regular basis. And Genesis, thank you guys. Yes, sometimes we don't know what our needs are. It's easier to know what our wants are. So, Adrian, any closing thoughts from you? And then we'll bounce to Skylar. Well, wait, you got to unmute yourself first.
That part. One thing that's coming alive for me is something you say often, Scott says often, is that most agreements aren't known until they're broken. And one of the things that's kind of in that vein that's come alive for me in doing this work is realizing how incredibly powerful and valuable it is to go through aspects of our lives and get clear, get curious about what it is that we want to do, how is it that we want to live, and explore that with our partners, particularly in the beginning, but all throughout, like the little things. What time do you want to go to bed? How do you like to keep the kitchen? How do you really go into the maybe more superficial aspects of life and the deeper aspects of life? What is your relationship with sex been? How do you imagine, it might unfold? Yeah, and make agreements with the people in our relationship. And it can also be helpful with our friends, so that we moving forward in relationships is intentionally as possible, is something we don't do. And I would love for this idea to get out in the world, to move into our relationships and get clear, like how it is that we interact, what are the various aspects that we navigate, and how do we want to be together in the various ways that we interact? How much time do we spend together doing this or doing that?
Actually
really flush it out.
I want to just jump in for 2 seconds. there's three things when I'm working with people. How available are you? How capable are you? And how willing are you? Like actually
Beautiful.
capable, you would, if you were hiring an employee, you would get a resume. But we rarely give out a relationship resume. In fact, oftentimes the resume, the last person that they work for says, total asshole, warning, warning, warning. And you go, nah, not me. I know better. I can fix them. Bring on the assholes, bring on the, like we don't get their resume and we laugh about it, but and they don't get ours, but it's like, how available are you? How capable are you? Do you take it on? Like, I know that if I went to Daniel's shop and started playing with glass, I would not create the same art. I might end up blowing the shop up because I'm not trained. It's not like I'm not a bad guy. I'm not. I'm smart, but I'm not trained in that. And most people aren't trained in relationship, but they expect to make art like Daniel's.
Mm-hmm.
That art has taken years to create. It's not something that fell out of the, whatever the glass blowing thing is. So Adrian, you've been working actually also on yourself for years, and I want to acknowledge that. And that's why I picked all of you, is because this is a conscious group of men that have been working on themselves for a while. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm going to bounce to Skylar. And then I'm going to, for everybody who's still on, there's an invitation I'm going to leave at the end. So I put Love Coach Academy at the bottom. If you want to become a love coach, Scott is a great trainer in this area, and he helps people have huge breakthroughs in that area. If you want to take a deep dive into relationships and learn these 7 skills and learn about your ROS, I'm sort of the mad professor of relationships. Scott's the guy who comes from his heart and teaches you about heart connection. I'm the guy who tells you what's going on behind the scenes and what skills you need. So we're doing a class June 6th, and it's at arguelesslovemore.net/course. One last thing, if you want some immediate support, you can either go to Love Coach Academy. There's a bunch of coaches on that page, or if you think that somehow what I have to offer would be helpful, then you can go to my website, arguelesslovemore.net/support, and get a breakthrough session. Spend about an hour to an hour and a half and really get a deep dive into your relationship. So we're going to bounce to Skylar, who's going to wrap it up and say something brilliant. No pressure, Skylar, but.
Wonderful. Yeah, one of the most powerful things that I've learned suffering from depression was that I realized I was hopelessly dependent on a relationship. I always said, without a relationship, I am useless. With a relationship, I'm Superman. I could do anything. And I had that validation, that confidence, and it came from somebody else. And so what I ended up doing is I found that I would hold people at a distance while asking, them to come closer, and kind of not realizing my own invisible hand. So the solution I ended up getting was I always said, because I did a bunch of stuff, like I did stand-up comedy, I did a bunch of like stuff where you have to be open, you have to be very vulnerable, you have to be on stage, and I'm like, I can't get triggered. It's impossible to trigger me. I'm untriggerable. And realizing that the thing that I didn't realize I was doing is holding this person at a distance was me being triggered, was the result of me being triggered, is that I would push these people away. And so the sentence that was ringing through my mind while you guys were talking was, just because I don't feel good about something that my partner said doesn't mean they're wrong. And I really gotta that's a new one in some ways. So I'm really burning the midnight oil on that guy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Skylar, Adrian, Daniel. And thank you, my partner, Scott Katamas, and Debbie G. Scott from Love Coach Academy, and Debbie G. from Spirituality Gone Wild. And we're on calls. There are calls 7 days a week, twice a day. One is at 9 a.m. West Coast time. One is at 6 o'clock West Coast time, and you can get some of the details at Love Coach Academy, and there's a link there that you can get it, or you can go to Love Coach Academy in Facebook and find out there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your comments. If there's somebody you think that will get a lot from this, let them know about this talk. And next Thursday will be Men's Talk again. So, and then, oh, I should say one thing. Saturday morning, I'm interviewing Gary Salyer, who's an author about relationships, and I'm going to be talking to him about his brand new book. So Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, hope to see you here. Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome day. Ending the broadcast.